Rev up your engines! If you're like me, you hate wasting money on fixing parts of your car that shouldn't have broken in the first place. So I'm going to show you some preventive maintenance that can save you a ton, keep your car looking and running smooth without wasting money on repairs you could have prevented. Now, if there's one thing that really irks me about modern cars is the headlight assemblies are all plastic. Look at my old Celica. Glass. This thing's 30 years old. The glass is still fine. Glass doesn't fade away and melt. But plastic, unfortunately, it fades, it melts, and a lot has to do with the ultraviolet rays of the sun destroying this stuff. Now, I've been using this Plexus for years. It's a polish, it's a cleaner, and it protects against UV rays to keep plastic from cracking, from fading away. It's not cheap, but it really works well. Now, if you know anything about Toyotas, this is an 07 Matrix. These are not the original headlights. The problem was I bought the car used from Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix, Arizona gets real hot. They were already faded away. So I really couldn't do much. And I like these darker ones anyways. They look cooler than the old ones, so I replaced them. And I use Plexus on them. Mind you, I haven't used them in a while. I've been a bad boy. We came from Rhode Island, Tennessee. It's got rain and everything on it. So you just spray the stuff on and you gradually polish it around. I advise doing it at least a couple of times. Once you polished it, get a new towel and then finish the job. Get all the haze off. Now, these headlights have been on here 3 times as long as the original ones that faded away, and they're still looking pretty good. You do the preventive maintenance, they can last. So you get a new car, I'd say use that stuff. I'd use it at least once a year. Hey, 3 or 4 times a year, cleans them and polishes them, gets the dirt off. But mainly, the UV rays from the sun that destroy it, it protects them so the plastic doesn't fade and crack, and then you gotta buy new ones. Okay, you can see I've done the plastic on the back. These are aftermarket because they look cooler. Any kind of plastic stuff. The little stepper here, that's all been done over. Made it nice and black and shiny and not faded away. Okay, let's face it. We live in a cheap plastic world. So, you might as well fight it as well as you can. Stuff like Plexus, it'll coat it. It'll keep the ultraviolet rays of the sun from destroying the car, so you don't have to buy parts that are going to crack, fade away. You can just keep them shiny and keep them supple. It doesn't just clean and polish them. It protects them from UV rays. And UV rays are what destroy plastic crap. Other than parking your car in the shade all the time, hey, go to the airport, it's going to be out in the sun. You go to a football game, it's out in the sun, whatever. Trade it with Plexus every once in a while. You can use it on the inside, shiny, keep the dash from cracking. Anything that's made out of plastic. Now, if you've ever had to replace an electric motor assembly for your power windows, you're going to love this because it keeps them working smoothly and doesn't make the engines drag too hard to pull up and down and then burn out. Just spray silicone. You can see this is Blaster spray silicone lubricant. You can use any brand you want. It is a great, pretty much waterproof lubricant that is phenomenal for letting things slide smoothly. It's real easy to use. First you roll the window down, get the little straw, then you spray up and down the runners, okay? The glass goes up and down the runner. So, you spray it in the back runner, wipe off any excess. It won't really hurt anything as long as you wipe it off. Then you do the same in the front. And run it up and down a few times. And of course, do all 4 windows. You got a 4-door car. What it does is it makes the glass slide up and down easily. If they stick, they'll get dirty, they'll start to bind, your motor has to work too hard, the motor will burn out, sometimes it'll bend the arms inside, sometimes the cables will snap. Very expensive job. You got 4 motors, 4 assemblies, 1 in each door. You just do it maybe once or twice a year. And do it especially before winter. Because when you do it before winter, this makes it slip and slide, and a lot of times it can keep ice from building up and freezing in on it. It's just plain old silicone lubricant. You can buy whatever ones you want. It's a spray. Just make sure you wipe it all off when you're done so it doesn't leave any stains anywhere. Now, if you have a more modern car like this 2022 Toyota Tacoma PRD, you're going to notice there's things your old cars used to have that the new ones don't. For instance, this does not have a power steering pump that pumps hydraulic fluid. Try as you may, you will not find any power steering pump here. It is electronic. So, aside from not driving your car underwater so the steering column is underwater, or pouring giant big gulps in there, it's a pretty sealed system. There's nothing you need to do mechanically, but this is where battery maintenance comes in important. It's all driven by battery power. You got a weak battery, to make it not work right, and even worse, if it's straining and shorting out, you don't want to short out that expensive motor. You want to make sure your battery toners are clean like this without corrosion, and that none of the wires get loose, especially the ground wire. Any corroded wires, loose connections, that creates a voltage surge. You need more power to go through it. It overheats stuff. It can ruin electronics. So it's a good idea to have your battery tested once every year or two, just to make sure the battery's good so it doesn't start to destroy things like the electronic power steering that cost a small fortune. These Toyotas are pretty well made. I've never seen one break yet, but I see them break all the time on Fords, on GM, on Chrysler products. So, one, you want to buy a good vehicle that's got a good electronic power steering system, and of course, as far as I'm concerned, this is the best. It's inside. A bunch of Fords have them down on the bottom. Where the power steering rack is, the motor's there. It gets wet, rain, mud. Stupid idea. And realize that more modern cars, some of them have electronic thermostats. I mean, Volkswagen, Mercedes have been using those for years. They have all kinds of problems with them. They also have electronic water pumps. Some of the modern Toyota dynamic force engines use electronic water pumps for more efficiency. That's electronic. It's an electric pump pumping hot coolant. I see problems in the future with that, but we'll find out what happens there. But it's all run electronically. You got to make sure the battery, the terminals, the connections are all tight, not loose or corroded, and that your battery's still good. Just have it tested every once in a while. And the same thing with the alternator. You can have that tested every once in a while too. Now the next maintenance item I'm going to talk about is spark plugs. Now the saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, doesn't necessarily apply here anymore. Now back in the day when my old Celica, that's now 30 years old, was new, a lot of people used copper spark plugs. They would wear out after a certain period of time, sometimes as little as 25,000 miles. You'd replace them, put in new ones. But today, many of the modern cars use what are called, as you can see here, iridium spark plugs. They use iridium spark plugs. I've seen cars with iridium spark plugs with 200,000 miles on them. They're still running fine. They've never been touched. But that's not a good idea, because as the spark plugs wear inside, the gap gets wider. Then your ignition system has to work harder and harder to fire the electric spark across it to fire the gasoline. It can wipe out computer control modules, ignition coil systems. They have to work harder if the gap gets bigger. So really, I mean, just to be on the conservative side, I'd change them at least every 100,000 miles. No big deal. If you keep them in, the car might run okay, but as that gap gets wider as it wears, the ignition system has to work harder. You don't want to pay for some computer modules that otherwise would have lasted forever just because you didn't change the spark plugs at 100,000 miles. Even though the car was running okay. So no biggie, just change the spark plugs maybe once every 100,000 miles. Hey, it's not that big of a deal. And speaking of 100,000 miles, don't forget your coolant. Toyota coolant's good for at least 100,000 miles or 10 years. It has all kinds of great anti-corrosion inhibitors, and you'll need to change it like once every 100,000 miles or every 10 years. You don't want corrosion to destroy your engine. Bunch of it is aluminum. It will corrode. Take the modern Toyota dynamic force engines. Not only do they have electric water pumps that cost a fortune to change, they also have electronic thermostats. You want to keep them good. Now, when I was young, we had to change coolant every 3 years or 30,000 miles. You only got to change it once every 100,000 miles or every 10 years. Just make sure you use the Toyota pink coolant. It has to say that it meets Toyota's specifications, because Toyota has a pretty high specification. And you can learn how to drain and fill it yourself. Watch my videos. It's not that hard to do. And then look at all the things that won't go wrong. Your engine won't corrode. Your water pump won't go bad. You won't have problems with a radiator core that'll go bad. Yes, they are plastic radiators. So you might say, Scotty, oh, it's plastic, who cares? It's not gonna bother plastic. The plastic is the tank on the top and the tank on the bottom. The middle is, guess what? Aluminum. And aluminum will corrode even worse than steel will rust. Now, another really important maintenance item is your tires. Now, most people have tire pressure monitoring systems. Oh, they'll tell me if the tire's low. Well, sometimes they break, sometimes they don't. But it doesn't tell you the shape that the tires are in. You want to look at them every once in a while. Now, these tires are like 6 months old. Of course, they're in excellent shape. You want to look for cracks, bumps, any kind of problem. If they're wearing unevenly, showing that you got a front end problem or that your struts are worn. And you want to especially look at your tread. Make sure you got tread and it's not bald. Now, this may sound crazy, but if you have bald tires, they actually have really good traction when it's dry outside. Look at drag strip tires. Look at tires on go-karts and go-kart racing. They're all just bald. They're just bare rubber. Phenomenal traction when it's dry outside. But once it starts raining, they will slide all over the road. You might say, oh, my car handles fine. It's dry outside, la, la, la. Well, that happened to a friend of mine a couple of years ago. He had a Toyota Camry. Being a Toyota Camry, he thought everything lasts, doesn't burn oil, runs. He doesn't check anything, right? Well, guess what? It was front-wheel drive. His front wheels were bald. He was driving from Houston to Corpus Christi, and they get some real monsoons in the summer when the heat builds up and the clouds come down, especially in the afternoon. He almost got killed. He slid off the road, ended up in a ditch upside down, all because his tire didn't have tread. It worked fine. It drove okay, but there wasn't tread to push the water out of the way. You know, it's on a modern tire. Look, they got all kinds of grooves, pushes the water out of the way so you can ride and not have a problem with bald. You're riding then down here on top of water and you hydroplane. Now, my wife is always telling me I don't appreciate her. Well, let's face the facts. Most people do not appreciate the tires on their vehicle. They're just there. They don't think about it. Think about it every once in a while. Especially if you find your car starts pulling to one side or starts squealing when you take corners. Then you want to check them out. And one of the most important things is age. Tires are made out of rubber. They only last so long on the highway. So if you go and look at your tire and they have micro cracks like the one up in the corner here, if you see a bunch of micro cracks, buy some new tires really soon because that means they're at the end of their lifespan. So now you know a few things that you can easily maintain yourself to save from having to spend a fortune in repairs later on. What do they say? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Just keep it in the back of your mind. Things you can easily do yourself every once in a while to save you money, keep your car looking good and running good. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.